Hello everyone, welcome to the NPTEL online certification course. Our course titled Medical Law. Myself, Dr. Chaitanya Mittal, Medico-Legal expert at Dr. B.C. Roy Multi-Specialty Medical Research Center, Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. So, as you know, we were at the last module, 8th module about the clinical trials. So, today we will discuss about the lecture number 39 of our course, that is on medico-legal issues in clinical trials. So, in this we will discuss what all issues comes when we discuss about the clinical trials, how we should proceed it or how to do counseling with the participants who involved in it, or what the even the principal investigator should also know in the clinical trials, so that the further he should not face any legal issues. So, in this lecture we will be starting with the medical legal issues in clinical trials with the basic, like what all are the phases there in the clinical trials, and later on we will discuss about the what all issues comes even in the perspective of ethical, legally or medical way. So, the important topics or the concepts which are covered in this lecture are the clinical research, new drug approval, regulatory framework on clinical trials, phases of clinical trials, and lastly we will discuss about the medical legal issues which are faced by the even participants or by the principal investigator or whole teamwork in the various stages of clinical trials. So, the important keywords involved in our lecture are the disease, drug, clinical trial, clinical good practice, ethics, consent. Consent is also as a form of informed consent, clinical, like it is a good clinical practice, GCP is also we say. So, we will start our lecture with a basic example, as a hypothetical example, that the Mr. Atul, who is an 69-year-old male, was just diagnosed with a disease, Alzheimer's disease. So, he has lost the memory loss. So, he got worried about his life, how it will be get affected. He has shared his concern with his treating physician, and the treating physician told him about some clinical trial that is being conducted on Alzheimer's disease for getting a new treatment. But as a concern of clinical trials, as a layman, he got worried about it. So, the Mr. Atul has a concern about the clinical trials, and he got scared about the clinical trial may worsen his condition. That can also be possible. It is not necessary that the all clinical trials have a successful result. Anything can happen at any phase. So, that is why there are the different phases of clinical trials, and even before conducting on humans, we conduct on the animals and various, like even the placebo or the dummies or even volunteer patients. So, it does not go directly to the particular patient. So, there are the various, that is why there are various phases of clinical trials. So, definitely the layman will scared while hearing about the clinical trials, whether I should go on this treatment or not, or I should wait for that successful of the phase 4 of clinical trials to come into the market. So, definitely his point was correct, but the doctor or the treating physician has explained about all the risk and the benefits of being part of that clinical trial. So, he given a complete concern about after hearing all the risks, benefits involved in the research of this clinical trial for a Alzheimer's disease new treatment. So, all this information with a counseling to the participant, he agreed and he has given a consent to participate, or he felt better about hearing the clinical trials, and he got a confidence that probably I can get a treatment. So, like that we should give a proper counseling to the participant, like we means is the investigator part. So, that the clinical trials have a successful result. So, with this introduction, so we should know about the what all are the clinical trials. Clinical trials are the scientific term used for testing newly evaluated drugs and knowing their safety and efficacy. So, we should know that the how effective will be there, whether even the treatment like condition of the patient or the treatment for that particular disease has an effect or not, because there is a lot of funds are involved in the clinical trials, whether maybe the placebo, that is no drugs are being involved, even that is also may be helpful, because it is all linked with the psychological mental well-being. So, definitely the clinical trials really very helpful for particular diseases, even the old and the new diseases, to come up with a new treatment. It can be defined as a process designed to determine the safety and efficacy of a particular drug or device on human beings. Generally, the clinical trials have been performed when satisfactory information regarding the quality of non-clinical safety is available and the governed authority of the drug or the device has been approved. So, after approval only, after complete like phase 3 trial, then only the phase 4 comes into the market. So, after complete phases of clinical trials, after it get approval, then only it comes to the market, and it can be used on the patients or the human beings specifically to proceed with the new treatment of a particular disease. So, the significance of the drug trials in advancing health services is paramount, as the introduction of novel pharmaceuticals and therapeutic modalities hold the potential to enhance both the longevity and overall well-being of patients. So, in order to address this imperative, there is a concurrent effort by the government to enlarge the number of clinical trials with a simultaneous emphasis on safeguarding the rights and safety of trial subjects. So, in India, in our country, what is the scenario of the clinical trials, how it has come up, or how it is important, or what is the going on clinical trials in our country. So, India has emerged as a prominent destination for clinical trials, contributing significantly to global research fields of pharmaceutical, biotechnology and healthcare. As you know, even the COVID pandemic, so the India has given a vaccination worldwide. So, that is the way the India has emerged with a good destination or doing the good clinical trials. The country's diverse population, extensive healthcare infrastructure and a large pool of potential study participants make it an attractive location for conducting clinical research. India has witnessed a substantial increase in the number of clinical trials conducted over the years. So, what all the how it has come up with the international framework for clinical trial regulation. So, even it started with the Nuremberg Code, which happened during the World War II. Why it has happened? Because during World War nobody has followed the ethics. All the soldiers who are involved in the World War, so they were given the vaccines or the injections directly without knowing their risks over their body. So, lot of mischief have been done, lot of non-ethics things being followed. So, there leads to the formation of Nuremberg Code with the various trials being done over the soldiers or the participants or during that the population during the World War time. So, it has leads to the Nuremberg Code with the Nuremberg trials in a year 1947. Then, because of this lot of ethical issues with the Nuremberg Code, that everything need to be done with the explaining the risk and the benefits of the involvement in the research and taking their concern, then only the volunteer or the participant should participate in the research or clinical trials. Later on, the further improvement being done by the United Nations by Declaration of Human Rights in the year 1948. Further, there is a declaration of Helsinki, which is on the human experimentation. So, there need to be how the human beings which are involved in the participants. So, as a participant in a clinical trials which have come up in the year 1964, which says that after even explaining all the risk and benefits, even the participant agree, then also he should be told in his own language, native language, that at any point of time you can say that I do not want to participate further, can stop at any point of time in between the research, even any risk happens. So, what all the compensation will be given to you, and these all things are being mentioned in the declaration of Helsinki in the year 1964. Further, the improvement being done on the ethical conduct. So, by the national statement on ethical conduct in the research involving human beings in the year 1999. Before that, going to the ethical conduct, there was also change done by the United Nations Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, Civil and Political Rights in the year 1966, and later on also there was a changes done on ethical conduct in the year 1999. So, like this, there was an international framework for clinical trial regulation, how it should have been come up with the rules and guidelines, how the clinical trial should be done involving the human beings. So, following starting from 1947 and coming to the 1999, and now also there are many ethical committees are being made, many review boards are being made. So, the overall the main part is follow the ethics. Nobody should be forced to participate in a clinical trials. So, that was the international framework. So, coming to the national framework for relating to the clinical trials, which come up with in the year 1940 with the Drugs and the Cosmetic Act. Later on, we have discussed in a national ethical guidelines for biomedical and health research involving human participant in a year 2005, which got amended in a year 2017 later on. And also there was a Indian GCP, that is a good clinical practice guidelines in a year 2001, and the last it has come up with the new drugs and clinical trials rules of in a year 2018. So, like this the changes are being necessary following the ethics, need done any lot of changes, so that nobody should be forced to participate in particular research involving the human beings in a clinical trials. So, we will discuss one by one. So, under the Drugs and Cosmetic Act in a year 1940, this act which first came into being in a year 1940, which regulates the import, manufacture and the distribution of drugs in the country. It also ensures that the drugs and the cosmetics sold in the country are safe, effective and conform to essential equality standards. It has many chapters, rules, schedules and is amended at regular intervals to ensure greater safety, efficacy and drug equality. So, this has to be necessarily to come up with the Drugs and Cosmetic Act, how the drugs to be done, the manufacturing and the distribution in whole country. So, there are the various schedules, the famous Schedule Y and the rules 122A, 122B, 122D, 122DA, 122DAC and 122E are the key documents governing the country's clinical research. So, these are the very famous rules which all the viewers can go through for further reading. It is mandatory that all clinical research that falls under the ambit of Schedule Y comply with the necessary requirements. It has 12 appendices, formats for clinical trial protocols, informed consent forms, ethics committee approval templates and a format for serious adverse events reporting. So, whenever there is any serious adverse event occur, so there accordingly the compensation to be awarded, or at any point of time the participant can stop involving in the research activity. So, lot of protocols are there in the Schedule Y. So, that need to be followed by the investigators. So, coming to the national ethical guidelines for biomedical and health research involving human participants. The Indian Council of Medical Research, that ICMR, is the apex body under the Department of Health Research DHR, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, for formulation, coordination and promotion of biomedical research in our country, and is well recognized globally for its landmark initiatives in formulating ethical guidelines for biomedical research. ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, issued a policy statement relating to ethical aspects of human research in a year 1980. In line with advances in medical research, ICMR updated the ethical guidelines in a year 2000 and then in 2006, which is very much necessary to being done the amendments to make the further guidelines accordingly by following the ethics among towards the humanity. So, the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participant in a year 2017, which were released on the October 12th, 2017. It is about a detailed document covering a wide range of topics in which the existing chapters have been updated and new sections of current importance have been added. The principles of social responsibility and environmental protection have been added to stress the need to protect social and cultural harmony and conserve our limited resources in conducting biomedical and health research. So, it is not only necessary to do only focus on the humanity, that the treatment to be done or particular the disease, new disease has come up or new drug need to be find out for particular disease. It is also responsibility to preserve or to protect about the environment and the society. So, coming to the next guidelines about the good clinical practice, which have come up with the year 2001, is an international ethical and scientific quality standard for the design, conduct, performance, monitoring, auditing, recording, analysis and reporting of clinical trials. So, need to follow the good clinical practice guidelines. So, good clinical practice provides assurance that the data and the reported results are credible and accurate, and that trial subject has rights, integrity and confidentiality are respected and protected. Definitely that is a very much necessary, whoever the subjects or the participants are involved in the clinical trials, their confidentiality need to be maintained. That should not be informed that who all are involved and what could be the reason. We have to respect their autonomy. So, who are involved in the clinical trials. So, coming to the next is the new drugs and the clinical trials rules in a year 2018. Clinical trials were earlier conducted in accordance with the requirements set out in Schedule Y of the Drugs and Cosmetic Rules 1945 DNC rules. However, which was like act in the 1940 and the rules come in 1945. However, there were concerns regarding patient safety and compensation provided to patients in cases of adverse effects they suffered due to participation in clinical trials. So, it is very much necessary due to any adverse event has occurred. So, particular compensation to be given as well as a complete treatment to be done to the patient or the participant involved in that. The Drug Controller of India appointed by the central government in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, that is the MOHFW, has been designated as the Central Licensing Authority CLA. The application for permission to conduct clinical trial is required to be submitted to CLA, that is the Central Licensing Authority. So, an ethics committee is required to be set up and registered by whoever intends to conduct clinical trials, bioavailability studies or bioequivalence studies. The trial can be conducted only with the approval of this committee, whose registration with the Central Licensing Authority will be valid for a period of 5 years. The most important changes brought in by the rules are the provisions related to compensation. Chapter 6 of the rules deals with the compensation in case of injury or death in clinical trials or bioavailability or bioequivalence studies of investigational new drugs. The quantum of compensation is required to be calculated on the basis of formula specified in the 7th schedule of the NDCT rules. So, the compensation amount, whatever the adverse event has happened during the research, so that amount to be calculated properly irrespective of the medical treatment. So, the complete compensation to be given and complete chance to be given whether to re-involve in the participant again as a participant in the research, or he want to withdraw himself or herself from the research activity. And scientists carry out basic research, for example, the drug receptors, enzymes, biological transport or other metabolic processes can pose as targets. In the case the new drug is to be developed against a specific disease, the research and the drug stage revolves around understanding the disease and narrowing down on chemical compounds that may influence it and creating molecules followed by compounds. Clinical research for such drugs is conducted in order to obtain regulatory authorization for the drug to be tested on humans. The clinical trial is to be designed accordingly to the sound scientific principle, and the results are to be analyzed in accordance with the clinical trial protocol. So, definitely need to be follow complete protocols and the guidelines while doing the clinical trials. So, we come to the phases of the clinical trials. There are the various phases. We start from the phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. We will discuss all the phases detailed way in the further slides, but we should know that how the clinical trials to be proceeded. It is not like directly done an experiment on the human beings, and if there is a event is not successful, reject it, or if successful, directly come to the market. So, there is a lot of procedures to be followed, how to do the clinical trials on particular either the drug, disease, or to find out any new invention to be done for particular disease or the treatment or anything, whatever being the investigator find suits to. So, there are a lot of phases we have to involve step by step. So, the preclinical studies. So, before a drug can begin the clinical trial process, it is tested by its manufacturer through preclinical studies for toxicity, otherwise known as its ability to cause serious harm as well as pharmacokinetic information. So, it is very much necessary to do the preclinical studies before it starts with the real clinical trials. Dosing is also tested during the preclinical research period. This is done using both in vitro as well as in vivo, in vitro inside, in vivo outside methods, and occasionally with the help of computer models. So, it is very much necessary to find out what about the toxicity level, that is a lethal dose, when it can be the fatal, particular dose, how it is a therapeutic affected, or it can cause a lethality. So, the toxicity, to know the doses, all to be calculated during preclinical trials before going towards the clinical trials or to the particular human being as a participant. So, coming to the phases, that is starts with the phase 0. So, after exhibiting low toxicity and completing preclinical study, some drugs goes into the phase 0 stage of the clinical trial, while others skip this stage and progress directly to phase 1. So, it is not necessary to go with the phase 0. So, it all depends how the preclinical studies being conducted on that particular drug or the device or anything. So, this phase is also known as human microdose studies, because it involves a very small group of participants who have been given a low subtherapeutic dose of the drug, and also there can be the case as well as a control study. So, one can be given as placebo, one can given as a low therapeutic dose. So, it is not, but it will be blinded, it is not being told that you have given as a placebo, like nothing, maybe simply water comparative to the glucose or compared to the ORS. So, it is not necessary. So, means to be said that what is there. So, it all completed blinded. So, it can be divided into control as well as a case, control as placebo and case as a particular low subtherapeutic dose of the drug, but it is not being told to the participant. So, this dose allows companies to understand the behavior of the drug in human beings. So, in the phase 0, so whatever being missed or in a doubtful in a preclinical studies about the toxicity or the dosing comes to the phase 0, but it is not necessary for everyone to go in the phase 0, it can go directly to the phase 1. So, coming to the phase 1 trials are the first full human study the drug will be subject to, and therefore, they primarily focus on its safety and tolerability. This stage involves a slight larger number of participants than the phase 0 studies. So, in this definitely it being focused on the safety of the participant with that particular dose of the drug. So, it is the start with the first full human study, that is a phase 1 of clinical trial, which is mainly focused on safety of the patient towards the drug. It is generally organized as a dose escalation study where the first small group of participants cohorts receives a very low dose of the drug. This phase is conducted using healthy volunteers. They are completely healthy. However, the patients with the indicated disease may be used if the drug's mechanism of action suggests it may not be tolerated in healthy people. So, it all depends. So, after all the clinical studies, if the toxicity and the safety level being recorded, so mostly the phase 1 being done on the healthy volunteers, but if there is any prohibition so that it can't be tolerable this dose, then it will be done on a diseased patients or the particular the disease for that particular treatment, the drug being tested, so that patients being involved, definitely after getting an informed consent. So, coming to the phase 2, in this stage the number of patients is increased once more with as many as several hundred participants being used to gauge the efficacy of the drug. During this test period, researchers can also pinpoint related side effects and continue safety assessments from previous studies. It also helps to determine the basic therapeutic doses for the next phase. So, with the phases wise, with the phase like preclinical studies, phase 0, phase 1, phase 2. So, as phase increases, the number of patients being increased and help to determine the best therapeutic dose for the next phases. So, coming to the next phase, there is a phase 3. It concentrates on discovering the drug's efficacy and differs from phase 1 and phase 2 studies because they occur over a longer period, involve more participants and happen under conditions that reflect daily clinical life. Participants in this phase are often categorized into two random groups, one taking the experimental drug candidate and other taking a placebo or the standard treatment. So, it is not necessary that placebo includes does not include the drug, possibly only simple water or even a sugar tablet, nothing else, or can be the standard treatment which is going on in a routine practice in that at that point of time. So, one can be the experimental drug or a new treatment or new drug, second can be the standard treatment versus placebo or comparative. So, in this phase the trials can be divided into two sub stages, that is a phase 3A and phase 3B. After 3A studies, companies can go for approval and stage 3B can continue to obtain more data on safety and support for the claim about the drug. So, coming to the last trial, the last phase of the trial, that is a phase 4. Following approval from the national regulatory authorities, some drugs continue in the clinical trial process and enter the phase 4, which is also known as a post marketing surveillance trial. Means the drug in the market and still it is continue in a trial, that is a post marketing surveillance trial. This phase of study allows the drug companies to uncover more information about the side effects and safety of the drug, as well as provide an opportunity for researchers to learn the long term risks and the benefits of that particular new drug. So, the phase 4 also has an important, but the drug has got an approval with the phase 3 of the clinical trial, that is also specifically phase 3A. So, coming to the medical, ethical, legal issues in a clinical trials or in a clinical trial research or even in a common research. So, it is a common issues which all can be faced by the from the participant side, by the investigator side, even whole research team should know about the medically, ethically and legal guidelines, formulations, principles, so that they should not face any issues. So, coming to the one by one we will discuss. So, first and foremost very important is the consent, specifically the informed consent. Simple way, two person agree for the same thing in a same sense, that is a consent. So, coming to the issue is ensuring that the participants provide voluntarily, that is the free, without any force, without any coercion. Informed consent is crucial. Language barriers and varying level of health literacy among participants may pose challenge. So, the to be explained is in their own native language, it should not that language should be a barrier. So, mitigation is implementing cultural, sensitive and easy to understand informed consent documents, ensuring that participants have the opportunity to ask questions and clarifications. So, coming to the next is the ethical review and institutional review boards. So, the in each and every institute or a medical college or any institution or any body who want to do the clinical trial research should have one authorization body or committee, that is the IRB or IEC, Institutional Ethics Committee or Institutional Review Boards. So, its issue is obtaining the ethical approval from the committee is mandatory. Delay or challenges in the review process can impact the timeline of clinical trial, but it is very much mandatory to take the ethic approval. So, proactively engaging with the institutional ethics committees, adhering to the ethical guidelines, ensuring timely submission of protocols for review can solve out this issue of getting ethical approval from the committee, but it is really mandatory to take, like how the informed consent is mandatory. Similarly, it is necessary to inform the institution or body that you are going to perform this clinical trial ethically. So, next issue is the data privacy and the confidentiality, who all participants are involved in your research or clinical trial. So, issue is protecting the privacy and confidentiality of participants' personal information is critical, especially in the era of electronic data storage. So, how to solve it: implementing robust data protection measures, obtaining informed consent for data sharing, and complying with applicable data protection laws. So, like that we have to take care about the confidentiality of the participants, take care about their data of the participants given for particular research. So, coming to the next issue is the patient recruitment and vulnerability, ensuring fair and transparent recruitment practices, especially when dealing with the vulnerable population, that is the extremes of the ages, that is either the children or the elderly. So, it should not do any mischief in recruitment process. So, implementing strict eligibility criteria, avoiding exploitation of vulnerable population, and obtaining additional safeguards for their protection. So, like that we can sort out this issue of recruitment and vulnerability population. So, publication in the reporting, maintaining transparency and accuracy in reporting study results, preventing selective reporting or data manipulation. So, should not do any data manipulation or the plagiarism in doing the publication or the reporting. So, adhering to ethical guidelines for reporting, registering trials in public databases, and submitting complete and unbiased results for publication. Should not do any bias or plagiarism with the already published data, or without registering the trials you have to start doing the research. You should register the trials first and then in a public database, and then you start the your proceedings of research. So, coming to the next is the monitoring and auditing. So, ensuring effective monitoring and auditing of clinical trial sites to promptly detect and address any issues. So, implementing robust monitoring plans, conducting regular sites audits, and ensuring compliance with the good clinical practice GCP guidelines. So, next issue is the post trial access and the benefits, is ensuring that participant can access any benefits or intervention resulting from the research after the trial concludes. So, clearly outlining the post trial access plans in the study protocol and adhering to regulatory requirements for providing benefits to the participant can help to solve this issue of post trial access and the benefits to the participants who are involved in the research part. So, coming to the conclusion of our lecture is that our country is poised to lead from the front in the global clinical development process. Its regulatory process has become more streamlined. India has now developed a strong reputation and meets professional global parameters in clinical research. The Indian regulatory agencies are working closely with the international bodies to update the clinical trial process and the regulatory system. Although regulations relating to the clinical trials have evolved considerably to match global standards, many issues still remain. So, there is still need to do many amendments, many changes, many awareness about the ethical guidelines. There are several gray areas in the regulation that need to be clarified. Hence, the authorities often need to be consulted for several issues or the industry practice need to be ascertained. So, this is a conclusion of our lecture, should follow completely the legal and ethical guidelines while doing any clinical research work. So, these are the references all viewers can go through for their further readings. So, there are the many PubMed articles and the sites where you can go through and have a further understanding of the medico legal issues in a clinical trials. Thank you very much.